Hi, everyone, and welcome to ACE Your Virtual Interview. My name is Lauren DePaul Barlow, and I am a senior career counselor in our Office of Career Design and Development here at Widener. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to chat with all of you today about how to ace your virtual interview. So the goals for an interview are a little bit different for all of the stakeholders that are involved. So there's typically two kind of groups. Well, one's really an individual, the other one may or may not be a group. But during an interview, employers and candidates each have kind of different goals for the interview. So the employer's goal is really to make sure that they can confirm the statements that you have made on your resume, and they want to learn a little bit more about you and your goals for yourself as a professional and your motivations that go into your work. You as the professional, so this is, again, an interview is a give and take process. So you as the candidate or the professional, you are here to learn more about the employer and the specific job opportunity that's available for you. You're also here in the interview to help yourself stand out from other candidates. And you're also kind of doing a little bit of a check on your part for your own comfort level in the work environment that you're about to enter into. You want to make sure that, the interview, although it is kind of a little bit, can be uncomfortable, you do feel like the people that you're interacting with, give you a pleasant feeling and it feels like home a little bit. A lot of people think that an interview is just asking and answering questions, but I actually like to break it down a little farther than that. So that is one piece of the interview, but it's kind of like in the interview, in the middle of this interview sandwich. So an interview actually begins with your preparation prior to the interview. Then you arrive at the interview, and then the questioning, the asking and answering questions part does kick in. And then at the end of the interview, you want to make sure that you
in here
the interview powerfully and you follow up at the end. So let's break each of these parts of the interview down a little bit more. And I know that this is acing your virtual interview. These three parts are the same, whether the interview is in person or done virtually. So preparation. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Thank you, Ben Franklin. So how to prepare. So we're going to talk about all of these areas in a little bit more in depth. So when you're preparing for an interview, you want to make sure that you are researching the organization that you are interested in becoming a part of. You're researching their industry and the interviewers if you have the opportunity to. You want to anticipate the questions that the interviewers are going to ask you, and you want to try and formulate as many responses as possible. You want to self-reflect during the preparation process, identify your strengths, achievements, and experiences that it's your goal to highlight during the interview. You want to nail down some logistical pieces which do look different in virtual life than they did in in-person life, I guess you could say. And you want to make sure that you are prepared to dress to impress and you check your digital footprint prior to the interview. Let's break each of these down a little bit more specifically. So where can you start your research? So by looking at the organization's website, you can learn a lot about their mission, vision, and their values. So starting with an organization's website is always really helpful when you're beginning your research process. You can check out their social media pages. A lot of employers are on, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now. So checking out social media pages during the research phase of your interview process can let you know kind of like what's trending within that company. What are they posting about? What are they crowdsourcing information for? And it can also help you learn a little bit about their culture. Is there personality behind these posts? Do you feel like the personality that's being showed by this employer through their social media posts is something that you would value too? Industry websites and business websites. So these are like professional association websites. You could see if your employer has been recognized recently for anything within the industry. Also looking up business news websites, have they been in the news recently for good or bad? reasons. Obviously, in the interview, you wouldn't want to bring up any of the bad stuff, but it's just good to kind of see, how your employer is showing up in their own industry. You can also check out reviews of an employer. So with any review, if any of you have used Yelp in the past, you just want to take reviews with a grain of salt. It is somebody's opinion, but it is nice to kind of use resources like Glassdoor just to learn a little bit more about how employers are perceived by employees. I mentioned in the last slide, if you have the opportunity to research the bios of the people that are interviewing you, that would be a good option to take. So you can do that by simply Googling that individual or checking them out on LinkedIn if they are on LinkedIn. You could read a little bit about kind of their professional background, their history, maybe what they do for the company. And that's just ammunition that you have when you're in the interview process, to maybe make the process a little bit more like a conversation than an inquisition, like, oh, I saw you went to the University of Miami, go the U or whatever. Maybe that wasn't the best example, but it's just a nice way to show that, to see if you have any connections with these individuals, and you can bring that information up in the interview so they feel more comfortable around you. The last place where you can go to research before your interview is your network. So see if anyone in your network currently works for the company you're interviewing for or has previously worked for that company. And just kind of ask them questions to help you prepare for the interview. Asking them, what was your interview process like? What did you like about working for this organization? Why did you leave? So those kinds of questions can just help you kind of shed light on what you're walking into. As I mentioned also, this kind of like research, you want to do a little bit of research on yourself. This is also known as self-reflecting. So you want to self-reflect, but you want to do it with a very focused lens when you're preparing for an interview. So you want to kind of self-reflect in relation to the job description. The job description is going to be your very best friend and buddy when you are preparing for an interview. The job description is essentially a list of your future employer's needs and wants. And so you want to look at that list of needs and wants, and you want to anticipate questions. So if they are looking for somebody who, works really well with a team, who understands social media marketing, and who has video editing background, you want to anticipate the questions that they're going to ask you within those spaces. And you also want to think about times when you have used your skills and strengths in order to produce achievements for your previous or current employers within the areas that are relating specifically to the job description. So by self-reflecting, you're kind of playing a little bit of offense, not defense. So you're preparing, you have different areas that you know that you want to talk about, and they are related to the job description, but you're kind of like, okay, I want to make sure that I tell my future employer about these, 5 skills that I have. So when you are delivering your answers, the goal here is to, again, explain your value to your future employer. And the best way to do that is to give examples of your work. So if we're using the social media skill that's present in the job description as an example, you want to maybe prepare 2 or 3 examples of how you have used social media marketing in your past experiences to support your past employers. And just have those stories ready to go so that this can demonstrate the value that you're bringing to the job once you are hired. If you're not sure what your strengths are, like I've worked with a lot of students and sometimes they're like, well, I don't really know, like, what am I good at? I'm not sure what this employer wants to know. Do yourself a favor and you guys can do this right now. Text your best friend. What is one thing that makes me really unique? Or what is one thing that I'm really good at? And just see what they say. You can also ask, previous coworkers, previous supervisors, why they valued working with you, what they think your greatest accomplishments are. And that can really help you kind of focus some of your interview answers and know where your strengths really lie. Also, NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, puts out this list of 8 core competencies every year. So these are the 8 core competencies that employers are looking for in employees. So they're looking for somebody who has leadership skills, critical thinking, teamwork, technology skills, and so on. So if you're really at a loss, you can kind of look at these 8 categories and think to yourself, what are examples from my past experience where I have demonstrated teamwork, where I have been a leader, where I have communicated really effectively in order to make something happen. And that's where you can start to pull some of your examples from that will demonstrate your value to your future employer. I'm gonna take a sip of water really quickly. So should you all choose to come to Widener or be involved in Widener, we are also here to support you with interview preparation. We have a lot of interview resources on my Widener, one of which is our favorite, is Big Interview. It is a virtual simulated interview platform. So Big Interview, I think it's on the next slide actually. Big Interview, again, it gives you the opportunity to practice interviewing on your own. So there's a question bank that's available. You can look at general interview questions, but you can also get really specific and look at questions that are typically asked in your specific industry for the specific job that you're applying for. So that's just an example of one of the online resources we have available for our students. And the last resource on the last slide was just you have the ability to schedule an appointment with the counselor to do a mock interview or just to kind of talk through an interviewing strategy. Before going on an interview, it's also really helpful to check your digital self. And I don't mean to we're all professionals here, so I don't mean make sure that your pictures are appropriate. I mean, you want to make sure that you're kind of putting out information on your social media channels that is somewhat related to your work, that your employer would find value in. So this could mean, resharing articles that are industry specific, or, liking certain information on LinkedIn. If you're applying to work for Pico and you're following Pico on LinkedIn, maybe like and comment on some of the recent stuff that they're putting out there on that platform. This will just raise the organization's awareness of you. So also to Google yourself, just do that really quickly. Make sure that the information that's popping up is what you want people to see. I know before I got this job, I Googled myself really quickly, and it was around the time that I got married. So the first thing that popped up when you Googled my name was my wedding website, which I'm happy I'm married and whatever, but that's not really what I was going for. So I just took the website down. I was already married, things were already happening. And then my LinkedIn profile was the first thing that popped up, which was more in line with, how I want to be perceived in the interview. Logistics check. So prior to 2020, this slide was filled with make sure that you have driving directions and, toll money and money for parking. Now, logistics for a virtual interview involve making sure, do you have the appropriate links for your interview? Do you have to download anything so that at the time or a couple minutes before your interview starts, are you able to just log on? Do you know who you're meeting with? Make sure that you have their name and contact information should something go wrong. So it actually, virtual interviewing, providing that you have links and downloads and everything's ready to go, it has minimized this part of the logistics process a little bit for the job seeker, which is great. This slide remains the same. Whether you are only on a virtual interview and they're only seeing, from the torso up, you want to make sure that you're dressing to impress. So that is from head to toe. Make sure that you're wearing clothes that are interview appropriate. So formal, erring on the side of conservative. You're making sure that clothes are neat, they're polished, everything fits. Nothing's too flashy, no flashy accessories or anything like that. And these are just some. Oh my gosh, sorry. That was a pre-recorded slide and I forgot to delete that, but those were some examples of how to dress during an interview. So now you've arrived. So we've made it through like 15 slides, and now we're at the point where you're finally ready for the interview. So you want to make sure that you are making a really good first impression when all of your interviewers first log on to see you. So that involves having a non-distracting background, whether one exists in your home or if you can use a virtual background, that's totally fine. You want to make sure that the video device is on something that is stable. So I'm not like, holding my computer here trying to tell you about interviewing. You have the device on something that's stable, so you can use your hands, move around, and the video stays still. You want to preview your background and experience if possible, just to make sure that everything is not distracting, everything is framed really nicely. You want a quiet environment with no distractions. Now, nobody lives in a super sanitized environment, so if you are anticipating distractions like, hey, the UPS driver might show up and my dogs are going to start barking, I apologize. You can also offer up some disclaimers before the interview starts if you can anticipate that there might be a small distraction. Make eye contact with the camera, not the screen. So I haven't been doing a very good job of that, but my camera is up here. So when I'm talking in an interview, I want to look right at the camera, not down at the screen or over at my face. You can also make sure that you have your resume available for your reference, a pen and paper to take notes, and a calendar handy in case this is like a screen interview and they say, what's your availability next week? You don't want to be like fumbling looking for your calendar. You just want to have that handy so you can efficiently answer that question. Okay, connecting the dots between your future work and the work that you've done in the past. So during an interview, they are going to ask you about questions from a couple different areas. So they're trying to learn a little bit about your interest in the role, your future goals, anything from your resume, the skills that are present on your resume. How do you handle stress, pressure, dealing with difficult people? And they really want to learn, what can you do for this company? What value are they going to add to their company by hiring you in this particular role? Again, I put this NACE slide up here again too, because if you're wondering like, what can I bring to the role? What should I talk about? Go back to those core competencies. A lot of times employers are going to be looking for people that have skills in these 8 areas. So question formats come up in a couple of different ways, and it's important to know the way that questions are formatted so that you can pivot your answer. So questions might be phrased in the way of doing a career background check or a history check. So this is just kind of like learning a little bit more about the information that you're putting on the resume, and also learning a little bit more about you and why you want to work for their company. So, why do you want to work for our organization? Can you tell me about yourself? What was your favorite course that you took in your grad program and why? The second type of question is a behavioral or a situational question. So these questions are trying to learn a little more about your problem solving and critical thinking skills. So when someone asks you a behavioral question, they're looking for a very specific example from your past experience. Tell me about a time when you worked with a team to accomplish a goal. Tell me about a time when you took initiative on a project. So they're looking for a specific example. A situational question is a hypothetical question. What would you do if you were dealing with somebody that was unhappy with you? So they're just trying to learn, again, a little bit more about how you have performed or you would perform in the role that they are hiring you for. The last type of question is a viewpoint question. So this is kind of like a chemistry check. They're just trying to see a little bit more about how you think about things, how you go through solving problems, what your opinion is on certain areas that involve their industry or their work. So it could be, what do you think about blank? Is it better to work independently or as part of a team? And so again, you would just give your opinion on the question that they're asking you. In this example, if an employer wants to learn about your ability to work with a team, they might phrase that teamwork question in a couple of different ways. So your answer will just pivot slightly based on the way that they're asking you the question. So a question about your professional history could sound like, how did you collaborate with a team to accomplish XYZ listed here on your resume? Tell me about a behavioral version of that question could be, tell me about a time when you accomplished a goal as part of a team. The situational question would be, what role do you usually assume in a team? And the viewpoint question could be, what is the most conducive environment for a team to work in? So you might have 1 or 2 or 3 examples prepared of your ability to work really well as a team. And based on the way the question's asked of you, you can use those examples in order to answer these questions. As I mentioned a couple of slides ago, you want to make sure that you're giving, when you're giving examples, you are highlighting your value and you're explaining your achievements. So this STAR strategy is a really helpful kind of outline or formula to follow when you're giving an answer to a question where you want to provide an example. So this is always in a behavioral question. You're always going to provide an example. But for situational and viewpoint, you could also opt to provide an example from your past experience explaining why you have this certain viewpoint, or if the situation did happen to you in real life, how you actually handled it. But the STAR outline is STAR, situation, task, action, result. So when you are kind of thinking through in your head, how do I give this answer? You want to think to yourself, what was the situation I was in? And that's the who, the what, where, when. The task, what did I have to complete in order to be successful in this situation, or what was the challenge? The actions, so because I was in this situation and I was assigned to this task, what action steps did you take? What skills did you use in order to complete the task? And then because of your actions, what happened? So these are the results. Situation, task, action, results. I know it sounds like a lot right now, like you're thinking like, Lauren, how am I going to keep all this in my brain? But the more you practice, the better you get at this. This is also a helpful strategy to use when you're trying to negotiate with someone, like maybe like a kid or a spouse, and you're trying to give an example of why you're right. Using the STAR strategy is helpful then too, so you can practice with your family. So why STAR? Why is this helpful? It is, as I mentioned, a helpful approach to use in an interview when you need to give an answer. It provides you with a structure for a strengths-based story to tell your future employer. It keeps you on track when you're on the spot. So this prevents you from rambling, and it also prevents you from giving an answer that's too short that the person that's listening to you doesn't quite understand the full extent of your value or your strengths. And as I mentioned, it does get easier with practice, I promise. So this is a long answer. It looks long typed out on a slide, but it doesn't take a long time to say. But this is an example of what a STAR answer could sound like. So if I'm on an interview for a role as another career counselor and the employer, sorry, I have to move my face. The employer asks me, tell me about a time when you led a team in completing a project. I could provide this question. So in my brain, I'm like, okay, situation and the task. So as a senior career counselor at Widener University, I had to create an assignment that would require 150 junior nursing students to write a resume and a cover letter and have both documents reviewed by a counselor prior to submission. So then I'm thinking to myself, okay, how did I do this? My actions. To accomplish this task, I utilized my team of 5 career counselors to present a resume and cover letter clinic, which allowed students to compose both documents in real time while having a counselor on hand to answer their questions. Then I utilized a sign-up genius to schedule my team to conduct 1 day of resume and cover letter reviews. Prior to working with nursing students, I provided my team with professional development to teach them how to write a nursing cover letter and resume. Then, okay, results. Because I did all of this, what did my employer get? What was the return on investment here? Because of my leadership, and also too, I'm explaining my value and my skills. Because of my leadership, I was successfully able to educate a large group of students while also providing each student with one-on-one attention. The students' resumes and cover letters were so strong that when the group began searching for full-time employment as seniors, I was able to focus on higher level resume work as opposed to beginning the education process at that time. So again, you're just kind of like thinking through those steps. What did I have to do? How did I do it? What were the results of my work? At the end of the interview, they'll probably say something to you like, do you have any questions for us? Those are all the questions we have for you. Do you have any questions for us? The only thing that you shouldn't say in that scenario is, no, I'm good. You want to take this opportunity to ask questions that show that you've done your basic research, that focus on how you can contribute to the institution. So if you get to the end of your interview and you have a really great example of how you've worked as a team, and you haven't been able to share that example yet, you could ask a question that allows you to follow on to their answer with your example. So you could ask a question like, what was the last team project that your group worked on? They'll answer, and then you say, oh, I have experience similar to that. And then you can use STAR to deliver your example. You want to ask questions that will allow you to talk about a strength that hasn't been discussed also. It is totally okay to write down all of your questions. I usually tell students to write down between 5 and 7, and that's just because you might have the opportunity to ask 3 or 4, but some of your questions on your list might be answered already. Some might take precedence after having a conversation with your future employer. So you just want to write down maybe 5 to 7, and it's fine to have them written down. And it's even a really good look if you get to this point and they say, do you have any questions? And you can say, oh yes, I've prepared some. Do you mind if I look at my notes? It just shows that you're prepared. And these are just a couple of examples of different types of questions that you can ask once you get to this phase in the interview. So how will the effectiveness of my work be evaluated in this role? What could you tell me about this position that's not in the job description? What are the most immediate projects that need to be addressed? How does upper management view this role and the importance of this position? Can you tell me about the last event your team did together? Has this position evolved over time, or has it remained primarily the same since its creation? Are there structured or informal opportunities to learn from other departments? I read about XYZ program on your website. Could you tell me about how it, I think it says relates to this role, how it might be connected to this role? So your questions, you want to show, again, that you've done your research, you're showing your strengths, but it also depends on your values. Like, do you value their culture? Maybe you want to make sure you ask about that team, the last event the team did together. It also too, if you'll have time to ask questions at the end, but if you can infuse these questions throughout the interview, so, maybe you let them ask you a couple of questions, and at the end of, one of their questions, if it makes sense to ask a question on your part, you can also, again, kind of like reading the room and feeling it out, you could ask questions sooner than the end of the interview. That actually then you have the opportunity to make the interview feel more like a conversation for all parties involved, and less like an inquisition, which makes a lot of times people feel a lot more comfortable. Okay, so after everybody has asked and answered all their questions, you want to make sure that you close the interview and follow up. Okay, so when you close the interview, you want to make sure that you emphasize your interest in the position if you are interested. Remember, the interview is transactional, it's give and take. You don't have to take this job. But if you are interested, you want to let your future employer know. So just by saying something before you leave, like, thank you so much for taking the time to interview me today. I really enjoyed getting to know you, getting to know your team and the work that you all do for this organization. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you again. I would be very excited to join your team. It just lets them know, like, this person's interested. You want to ask the interviewer about next steps. This is helpful to know when you should follow up after sending the thank you note, which we'll get to in a second. But then you'll know, like, okay, do they want someone to start like at the end of the month? Are they going to make a decision within 2 weeks? This just helps you kind of like lessen some of your anxiety while you're waiting for this decision to be made. Ask for business cards for everybody that you meet. And you want to send thank you emails within 48 hours to everyone, yes, everyone that you have met with. Close with a smile. It's always nice to leave with a smile. Oops, Amanda, I know you're out there.
I am out there. I am. So before we conclude the presentation for today, we just wanted to say thank you for everyone for joining us. But based on your interest in this topic, many of you may be looking to advance in your current career or switch careers altogether. So we just wanted to share with you very briefly what Widener has to offer. Widener offers certificate, associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral programs that are designed specifically for the working adult. Many of our programs can be completed in a hybrid format or fully online, and many are still accepting applications for the upcoming semester. So if anyone is interested in exploring our programs or how Widener might partner with you on the next steps in your education journey, our email is at the bottom of the slide here, gcs@widener.edu. I am the Director of Admissions and Enrollment here, so you are more than welcome to send us an email and we can discuss our programs and what the next steps are for you in your career and if any of our programs might suit your needs. So thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren in case anyone has any questions.